Have you ever found yourself wondering how a totally ridiculous story or some wild conspiracy theory just takes hold and spreads like wildfire? Well, it turns out it's not just about people being gullible. It's actually about biology. Today, we're going to dig into the hidden science of why your brain is, believe it or not, fundamentally hardwired to believe lies.
All right, let's just jump straight into the deep end, the absolute core idea of this whole thing. It's this. Your brain's default setting is to believe. It isn't neutral, it's not skeptical, not by a long shot. By default, it just accepts what it hears as true.
So how does this default setting even work? Let's break down the mechanics behind our natural instinct to just trust.
And this gets us to a question you've probably felt deep down, even if you never quite put it into words. Why is it so easy to believe something, but so hard to doubt it? I mean, it feels like one takes absolutely no effort, while the other is a serious uphill battle. And it turns out that feeling is a perfect description of what's actually happening inside your head. This whole phenomenon actually has a name. It's called the truth bias. It's our natural, almost automatic tendency to just assume that what someone is telling you is the truth. You can think of it as a basic part of our social software. I mean, for society to even work, for us to cooperate on anything from giving directions to building entire cities, we have to operate on a baseline of trust. If we questioned every single thing, everything would just grind to a halt. But this bias goes way deeper than you might think. According to something called Spinozan theory, our brains don't separate understanding from accepting. The very act of understanding something is, at first, the same as believing it. Believing is the automatic, effortless first step. It's only after we've already accepted it as true that we can start the much harder process of unbelieving it, and that takes extra time and real cognitive energy. So, our brains default to belief. That's the operating system. But, like any complex system, it has glitches. These are like exploitable bugs in our mental software that can be, and often are, weaponized against us. So glitch number one is the illusory truth effect. This is our tendency to believe false information is actually correct just because we've heard it over and over again. Your brain basically mistakes how easily it processes something, psychologists call this processing fluency, for a sign that the thing is true. The more you hear a claim, the smoother it feels to process, and the truer it feels. And here's where it gets really unnerving. This effect is so powerful that repetition can make a lie feel true even when you know for a fact that it isn't. Seriously, studies have shown that even when people start out knowing the correct answer, if you expose them to a lie enough times, you can actually persuade them to believe it. Familiarity can literally overpower rationality. It's wild. Okay, the next major glitch is one you've probably heard of: confirmation bias. This is basically your brain's active defense system for its own beliefs. We instinctively search for, interpret, and remember information that lines up with what we already think is true. And at the exact same time, we dodge, discredit, or just plain fail to process anything that challenges our worldview. The key thing to get here is that we're not just passive observers. We're actively hunting for evidence that tells us we're right. This quote, which is often attributed to Yogi Berra, just nails the backward logic perfectly. I wouldn't have seen it if I didn't believe it. Our beliefs literally shape the reality we allow ourselves to see. Now, these psychological glitches aren't just abstract ideas, they have a real physical basis. So let's switch gears from the software to the hardware. What is actually happening inside our brains when we process truth versus lies? Okay, so say hello to the amygdala. It's a key part of your brain's emotional center. And neuroscientists have found that when you tell a lie, the amygdala lights up and produces a negative feeling. That pang of guilt or fear or anxiety. It's like your brain's built-in emotional brake system against being dishonest. And the contrast is pretty stark. Telling the truth? It's easy. It has a super low cognitive load. But telling a lie? Oh, that's hard work. It is mentally taxing. Your brain has to invent the lie, suppress the truth, manage the story, and fight against that negative buzz from the amygdala. It's so taxing, in fact, that your reasoning centers can actually get suppressed under the strain. But here's the kicker. The brain adapts. Research from University College London found that with repetition, that negative response from the amygdala actually gets weaker. Each time you tell the same lie, you feel less bad about it. Lying becomes less emotionally taxing, which, of course, makes it easier to tell bigger and more frequent lies. It is, neurologically speaking, a very, very slippery slope.
So we've got a brain that defaults to trust, gets tricked by repetition, and can even adapt to dishonesty. So how are these features of our basic wiring exploited out there in the real world?
Well, let's look at a case study. The sheer audacity of lies from public figures like the now famous George Santos isn't just a flaw in their character, it's a strategy that exploits our character. It banks on our truth bias, that initial instinct to believe. And the constant repetition of those lies, no matter how crazy they sound, leverages the illusory truth effect to make them feel more familiar, and therefore more plausible over time.
Propaganda and political disinformation, they take this a step further. They often use a specific linguistic trick, dehumanizing metaphors. And as research from folks like Professor Marcel Danesi shows, this isn't just about being insulting. This kind of language is specifically designed to bypass your higher reasoning centers entirely and tap directly into the more primal parts of your brain associated with disgust and fear. So when dictators and hate groups use words like pests, vermin, parasites, or poison to describe a group of people, they're creating a powerful mental link. They are activating the neural pathways that associate those people with actual filth and danger. The more this language is repeated, the more hardwired those hostile feelings become, making violence seem not just acceptable, but necessary. Now, this all paints a pretty bleak picture of our own minds, doesn't it? But knowing how the system works is the first step to overriding it. And that brings us to our final section, choosing to unbelieve. So here's the crucial point. In an age where information is just everywhere, totally effortless, critical thinking is not our natural state. Believing is easy. Doubting, questioning, verifying, that is a conscious, deliberate, and often really difficult act. It is work. And it's incredibly important work because the stakes are sky high. As the research shows, once a lie gets past our defenses and we accept it as believable, our brain becomes even more susceptible to the next lie. The whole system gets compromised. And this brings us right to the central challenge we all face. We are wired to take the path of least resistance. Believing is easy, it's automatic, it's comfortable, but seeking the truth, that requires effort, energy, and a willingness to accept that you might be wrong. Which leaves us with one final question to think about. If believing is effortless, is truth worth the work?